It is so hot out here, Jamie. Shit, they're back. Come on.
Look at my graffiti.
Jamie? The hell? It's not keys.
Nice. My license plate is the most godless thing you'll ever see.
Oh yeah, baby. Let's do this.
Psych, it's me,
What?
Thomas.
Oh my gosh! Hello, everybody. Hello, welcome to Talk Heathen. Thank you, live studio audience. Wow, okay, so welcome to season 2, episode 29 of Talk Heathen. Today is July 22nd, 2018, and I am joined by Thomas Westbrook of Holy Koolaid.
What? It is so good to be here.
Dude, I'm so glad you came out. I am stoked.
Absolutely.
So you drove from
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
And I'm in Austin now, so.
Holy, how long is the drive?
Normally like 8 hours. I was actually a little bit north of Tulsa though, so it was, I think it was about 9.
Oh.
Yeah. I've been in this studio before, but I was sitting on the other side of the glass, so it's kind of cool to be in this seat.
Right?
The hot seat.
I'm so excited.
Or maybe it's terrifying. Am I about to get put on the spot with questions by young Earth creationists?
Oh, I hope.
Where's the missing link?
Were
If
you
there's
there?
only one.
Were you there, though?
I have a book.
So, yeah, we do normally take calls. I did just want to kind of check in with you, though. I know that I saw you last night on with Mr. Atheist.
Indeed, I was.
So what are you up to? What do you got going? And actually, for those people who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Thomas Westbrook. I grew up overseas as a missionary kid and became an atheist in college when I fell in love with science. And my biggest thing is a channel called Holy Koolaid, where I take really complex topics related to science, philosophy, religion, and I break them down in animated form. I try to keep them laser focused because I don't like when people waste my time, so I try not to waste theirs. And right now, my biggest project it's called The Story of Life. So that the next time that a creationist asks you, well, if it wasn't God, how did we get here? Then you can send them this series and it'll walk you all the way from the Big Bang through to like the formation of stars and planets to, you know, the chemical evolution, like prebiotic chemistry, all the way up to like modern life.
I'm actually at the second episode. Is that your most recent?
I am in the process of my third one right now.
Yes, okay, I'm up to date and it is really, really cool. Oh my gosh, look at this. Yes, we got your site up.
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you haven't checked it out, stop what you're doing, subscribe to Holy Koolaid. We'll wait. Well, actually, we're not gonna wait. We're gonna move forward.
And in the meantime, hit that like button.
Yes, absolutely. So also a couple things before we get in are actually, one other thing is Rob Chung is a volunteer and today's his birthday. And so I want to say, Rob, thank you for everything that you do. Happy birthday, brother.
One more trip around the sun.
Oh, yeah.
On this beautiful flat Earth. Where like the sun is flat.
Is that a thing? Really?
I don't know if anyone actually believes it, but it's a meme.
Oh, that is
And
beautiful.
if it's on the internet, it's got to be true.
You know, Jamie actually proposed that we live on a smooth Earth.
A smoother.
Yeah, that there are no mountains, that's just a lie.
Well, it's actually, Vsauce did an amazing video on this.
Yeah.
But he looked at like the size of the Earth compared to like the size of like the dips and valleys and mountains and whatnot. And it's smoother than a billiard ball.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Just because the Earth is so much bigger, like we can't really like grasp size, but like the Earth is so massive that like the tiny little like Mount Everest bumps are next to nothing.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
That's why you can't see the curve that all these flat earthers are expecting to.
Because it's freaking gigantic.
Yeah.
That is really cool, man. That is really, really cool. So, I know that we're going to jump into calls. Is there anything else that you wanted to share out with everybody before we started?
My only other like big thing is a podcast with Rationality Rules and Rachel Oates, 2 other YouTubers, called the Here and How podcast, where we explore big ideas and dive into kind of the past, the history of everything from the history of computer science and artificial intelligence to like, will robots take over the world? What's the future of AI? To things like, can we live forever? Can we end aging? And I think by exploring these big ideas, we can, we predict the future by creating it. And if we know where we came from, then we can kind of figure out where we want to go.
I love that.
It's a lot of fun.
I love that. For you guys who haven't seen a lot of other, this is Thomas, when I think of you, I think of community. I do. I think of people getting together and just, I know that you were involved with, let's see, the Faithless Forum. There we go. The word wasn't getting to my head. And I saw you at the American Atheist Convention this last year. You were like a huge convention. Like, you were everywhere.
I've definitely done the full circuit. The Faithless Forum was one actually that we put together, and it was a community organized. It was like a conference organized entirely by atheist YouTubers, and we're doing another one, I think this next year, 2019. But we put together a board of directors. It was a huge hit. It was the most positive, like fun, friendly, engaged conference that I've been to, and it's. We're really trying to bring the community together and show that like it's not about competition, it's not about throwing other content creators under the bus, but like, a rising tide floats all boats.
That's right.
And so we work together and we can really make a difference in the way that people think and push back against this, irrational insanity that we see happening around us.
Exactly. I mean, we're such a small community compared to the larger United States and the larger world. The atheism is just such a small niche that thinking that, we don't have room for another podcast, we don't have room for another YouTuber is bullshit. We need to get more voices in the movement out there because the more
here's
people
the thing.
are involved.
Let's say that you have a show that reaches maybe a few thousand religious people and 1% of them change their mind. And another 5% are like, well, I don't agree with it, but it's a fun, entertaining show, I'm gonna watch it.
Sure.
You've then expanded the audience for the entire community. And so then if you have hundreds of people like you, then all of a sudden like our base of followers and watchers and listeners and stuff, it grows.
Yeah.
And you can have people that are subscribed to multiple channels that are all watching it. And even if they only do it a little bit, by pulling more people in, you're really growing the base. It's not like we're having to compete for attention as much as we're growing the group of more rational thinkers in America, and I think that's what's going to make our country either succeed or fail.
I love it. And I mean, the voices are completely different. I know that for your show, it is so well put together. The animation, everything, the way, the time and the care that you put into it. This is a live show. What we do, it just goes out.
Yeah.
But you put so much effort and it shows.
Yeah. And I should say, I mentioned a second ago, I said for America, but like it's not just the US. Like this, we have international audiences watching. We have people all around the world tuning in. And we see it in the States because we're surrounded by a lot of religious insanity in politics and elsewhere. We're in the Bible Belt, but that's not exclusive to America. There are pockets of that throughout Europe. You got that in Australia, and not just English-speaking countries either. You've got all kinds of insanity worldwide. I grew up in a Muslim country, so it's you see it. We're really changing the course of this conversation all around the world, and it's exciting.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So, if you have something to say, you want to say it, start a podcast, start a show. If you want to support us, or actually if you want to call in, if you're a religious person watching, now's the time. We have 2 lines open. We're saving them for religious callers. So please feel free to call 1-512-686-0279. Also, you can support this show, Talk Heathen, on Patreon. We do have a Patreon, and it is patreon.com/talkheathen-to-me. We also have a super chat if you want to donate in the live chat and have what you have to say pop up. Please feel free to do so.
I want to add on that note, like a lot of people, they're afraid to get involved in activism because they're worried about like anonymity and they don't want their face to be out there. But if that's the case, like support shows like this. Like it's not hard to give a couple bucks and stuff so that people who are able to be out have a bigger platform and can reach more people.
And we're really able to, make good use of that. We're using Patreon dollars. We got a Hootsuite. We're scheduling and watching posts and getting more involved on different social media platforms. And it's because we're getting supported from our amazing audience that we're able to keep this building open 7 days a week now. And that is because of Patreon. So thank you all so much for it. And please, please consider even $1 an episode would be fantastic. At $2 and up, we start giving cool stuff, ad-free
cool
podcast.
Stuff.
Yeah. But I know that we have people waiting on the line very patiently, so I want to get to our first person. So let's go with Theodore in Pennsylvania, who's been waiting the longest. Theodore, you are live with Eric and Thomas. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing all right. What did you want to talk about today?
Death and how basically how nothingness is not an option and how life as something in the universe is obligatory.
Why do you think that?
Why do I think that? Okay, well, first of all, I'm an atheist. So my view is that I accept that the self, the self as in you, the thing that's created by your biology, the self is a creation of the universe, right?
In a manner of speaking, yeah.
Right? There's no soul, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm saying, sure, there may be a soul, but I'm coming from, my theory is based on the assumption that there isn't a soul, because I'm an atheist, and so I accept that there isn't a soul.
Okay.
Right? Okay, so based on that, if we are actually, as Carl Sagan put it, we are the universe experiencing itself, or a way for the universe to know itself. Mm-hmm. That's what he said. And he also said that the universe is everything that ever was and ever will be, right? So if you take those two things and you put them together, the result is there is no other thing than the universe, as far as being an atheist goes. So the only possibility is to have an experience of life as one of the endless organisms that are produced by the universe. So after you die, the only possibility, if it is true that there is no soul and there is no afterlife, then the only possibility is that experience will be experienced as an organism in the universe, as an insect or as a human or as something. It has to be something. You can't have nothing by definition. So,
well, it starts getting really weird when you start getting small. I suggest was a Universe from Nothing by Krauss actually talked about nothing and how things pop in and out of existence.
Yeah, you kind of have to start defining nothingness. Like, yeah. Are you talking about a vacuum? Well, even a vacuum isn't as empty and nothing is.
Well, I go back to the Greek definition or understanding of nothing. So there is no it to discuss, actually. So to me, nothing is the utter absence of anything. So okay. if it is the utter absence of anything, then it is unexperiential, and it actually, by definition, doesn't exist.
Well, but we can still do our best to describe. I mean, so the thing that kind of sticks in me, while the rest seems nice. I mean, I love the poetic, nature of the statement that we are the universe experiencing itself. I wouldn't. I've seen people read into it like that there was intent there. And when you made the statement, it has to be this way, that's where my skeptic kind of alarm pops up and I go, does it have to? Or is that all that we know? If the universe were to, if we were to have the Big Bang or whatever started the universe and all of that again, would we have life? Maybe. I don't know. Hold on just a second. Give Thomas a second.
When you start talking about, like, you think that there's no such thing as nothingness, well, we can talk about nothingness conceptually because we know what matters, we know what something is, we know what the universe is to a large extent. And so we can think of, like, the opposite of that. We can think of, what would it be like to not have that? Now, as far as whether or not there is something outside of this universe, if space is infinite, well, if space isn't nothingness, if even a vacuum has something in it, then I don't know. Like, is kind of the all I can really resort back to is I don't know what's outside this universe. There could be other universes. I cannot make a positive statement. I cannot say that outside of that there ever is anywhere where there's absolute nothingness. Maybe there is.
Or is it even possible that statement outside of this universe even makes sense?
Right.
Maybe not. Or, you know, 'cause-
if we follow the model that everything was condensed into this infinitesimal, at the moment of the Big Bang, or just, that when you say outside of it, you can't, because everything that is in there.
Well, and that's where I probably should refer to it as outside this cosmos, because the cosmos would incorporate the multiverse. But maybe the multiverse has an edge or a boundary or a barrier. Maybe there's complete nothingness outside of that. Maybe it goes on infinitely. Maybe it loops back in on itself. Then, you start getting into this realm of physics where you can conceptualize it and you can put it down mathematically and you can think about alternatives, but we don't really have any way to measure it. We don't really have any way to travel outside this universe, outside of our cosmos. And so I don't know. You might be right. Maybe there isn't such a thing as nothingness. Maybe there is.
My main point is that maybe I shouldn't say nothingness. Maybe I should say experience versus non-experience. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like the experience of life versus not having that.
Okay.
So no matter the scenario, whether or not we have souls or not, my conclusion is that it's not me that's going to be the one experiencing it, but there has to be an experience that, for lack of better words, takes precedence over a lack of an experience.
You sound like Brian Greene, the physicist.
Okay.
And the reason the reason I say that is because he looks at the universe in terms of infinities. And if you can have, there's two different ways that you can think about this. Is one, that our universe is infinite, and that outside of the observable universe, which is all the light that has reached us so far since the start of the Big Bang, outside of that it just keeps going and going and going. And when you think of things in terms of infinity, then you go far enough, eventually you're going to find a world exactly like ours. You're going to find someone exactly like you who, instead of eating cereal for breakfast, had pizza. You're going to find every possible scenario. If that's the case, then yes, eventually, life would be inevitable, because as unlikely, if it's possible at all, which the fact that we're here shows that it is, if it's possible to have conscious life, then eventually you would have it, even if it's astronomically small odds. The other infinity would be if you have so many different variable universes that are different shapes, that have different constants, that have different laws of physics, that eventually you're going to have one within there that has the properties that make life possible, and eventually you're going to find a scenario like ours. And it would be the same type of thing. You'd have you existing in an infinite number of situations and scenarios, and yeah, it would be inevitable.
Well, and we can't even fully posit that, because we don't know if life can be created, or life can happen with a completely different set of circumstances. There can be life that we don't know can happen with different elements or different. It's wild.
Well, you can have certain scenarios that are slightly different, where you would have a higher probability, a higher chance of life. And an example, you talked about Krauss earlier. Oftentimes, creationists will point to the cosmological constant, and they'll say, look, if this number was a tiny bit off, you wouldn't have life on Earth. But if it was precisely zero, then you would have more life that you would expect to pop into existence. So you see these little variables, these little scenarios where you can actually expect to have life under different circumstances. Sometimes it would be more likely, sometimes it would be less likely, sometimes it would be impossible, but I don't think that we necessarily know all of the situations under which it would or wouldn't be possible.
Yeah.
So.
I feel like you might not be understanding completely what I'm saying. I was wondering, would I be able to read something short that I wrote?
Probably not on this episode, but you can share it on the Reddit so we can go over it together.
It's seriously just one small paragraph.
I've been told that before. I'll give you the chance. If it starts going onto a page, though, I'm gonna. But go for it, man.
I'll be quick.
Okay.
If the universe is all that there is, and if there are no souls and there are no supernatural afterlife, then it follows that because we are but a product of the universe, that it produces the sensation of the self. And because it goes on after we as individual organisms die, that means that there is no alternative than to be an organism. Life is obligatory. So that is like the summary of it. I'm done reading.
Okay.
It's a metaphysical statement of in the same way that you're and I and everybody who's alive, we didn't have a choice to be born. We were the consequence of those organisms that lived before us. And it's just like a deterministic, on this deterministic trajectory of life producing life. And inevitably, because the universe is all that there is, we're forced into having an experience, whether we didn't
whether we like it or not. I don't know. I just it feels like a hard statement that I would really, really want to think about for a while, because anytime where you say we have no choice but X, then what you're leaving out is we need to explore what other choices there are. And I don't have the...
We're getting deep into the realm of determinism and free
yeah.
will, and we could do an entire episode just on those topics.
Which are things that I absolutely love. Let's engage on the Reddit, actually. I'd really like to talk to you a bit more about this, and I'd like to take the time to give you a well-reasoned response. If you don't like the Reddit, you can also email.
What about Twitter?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, cool.
Is it Dirty Heathen?
Dirty Heathen is mine. We actually also have one. Can you believe that Talk Heathen was taken on Twitter? Motherfuckers. Can you believe that?
Yeah,
I know!
I had to search through for Holy Koolaid on all the different platforms, and I still wasn't able to snag, like, Instagram or Snapchat.
So
I assume that was you.
No, it's not. And also, there's a Patreon under Talk Heathen, which is not us. I know. That's why our Patreon is patreon.com/talkheathen to me, because we couldn't get it. So if anybody has signed on to be a patron and it's patreon.com/talkheathen, that is not us, and you are not supporting us. It's just one of those.
I'm gonna start a show called Talk Nerdy Heathen to me.
Oh, say that again. I like it. Hey,
real quick, we had a couple super chats. One, I think Scripts, Clips, Series, and Flicks pledged $10 and said, anyone else having problems finding secular daycare?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a solution to that, but respond in the chat if anyone knows. And then Roger Wenzel pledged $5 just cause, so thank you to both of you.
Absolutely. And I believe we have Twitter, our handle is TalkHeathen1. And I'll pop that up on, I'll pop that up so that we can see it. But it's brand new, and so we have a lot more. But actually, you know what? I think I can announce this. We're going to be doing something really, really cool on that Twitter, so look it up. And I'll get the name of that Twitter. I believe it's twitter.com, TalkHeathen1. And I think we're going to do a contest, actually. So if you're on Twitter, if that's something you want to subscribe to, please do. Theodore, this has actually been a really fun call. I've enjoyed this. Thank you.
Oh, great. Awesome. Me too. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. Take care, buddy.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. The nature of existence. Honestly, that's one of the things that really pushed me into doing this show, is in getting involved in atheism, period, is being up until 3 o'clock in the morning just pondering the nature of existence. It's fascinating.
Yeah. I think, and he may have been going somewhere else with this, but when he talked about life is kind of inevitable, obligatory, like it's just going to happen whether you like it or not. Again, it gets into the realm of infinity. Like, if you have an infinite universe, it's with infinite variables and possibilities, then I would probably agree with him. But if that's not the case, and maybe life is much more common and much more, and it's not inevitable, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I cannot make that absolute statement. I cannot say, we know this. We know that our life exists, so we know that life can exist. but we have a sample size of 1.
Yeah. So how rare, how common is that going to be?
That's too, when you start looking for like aliens in outer space and the likelihood of finding them, scientists oftentimes like they'll put forth Carl Sagan and Drake, I forget Drake's first name, but they put forth the Drake equation. But only the first 3 variables can we really calculate with any kind of like even a little bit of certainty. Beyond that, it's all speculation.
Yep.
And you're like, maybe there is, maybe there isn't like a lot of alien life out there. Maybe there's, And
it varies by orders of magnitude, so it's not like... All right. So let's actually get to a theist caller. I have Zane in Atlanta, Georgia. You're live with Eric and Thomas. How are you doing?
I'm on the phone, man. I'll see you later.
Hello?
Hello?
Zane, can you hear us?
Hi, yeah, I can hear you.
Hi. What did you want to talk about today?
I get right into that, but Thomas had kind of brought up something that I thought about a lot, and I got a very this version of it, and it's basically like the Lion King. Basically how you cycle through, you're a walking mammal, and then when you die, you feed the grass, and I kind of see that as that's kind of still you, even though you're not a conscious being.
Well,
that's kind of how I think about how that, you will never stop existing.
What do you mean you're kind of still you? Because you said that you're not conscious, but if your consciousness doesn't live on, like, I believe that, like, your matter, the elements that compose your body, they don't just disappear, like they're recycled. But it's...
Yeah, like if you lost your leg, would that leg still be you?
It's difficult, but that's not even what I called in to say, so I guess I'll just move on.
Sure. I'd like to just throw in a quick 2 cents about that. I actually hold that your consciousness is a byproduct of having a brain, and that if I suffered some kind of traumatic brain injury, I could theoretically not be me ever again, and I would be something else, because what am I but my the story that I tell about myself, what I know about myself, what I like, what my aspirations are, and where I want to go with those things. So if those things change, am I still me? Like those are all kinds of questions that I would ask, and so I think that's where I fall in with the with Thomas on this one. Is I don't think I am me after I die. I think that, just like you were saying, matter continues, but...
a couple examples I would give you on this. What'd you say?
The kind of argument comes from the same place as in if you had a family member in the hospital with brain trauma, you would still point to that person and say that's your family member, even though all of a sudden, they don't have any of the same memories or saying any of the same things.
Well, I think what Eric is getting at here is that your consciousness, your mind, is a construct of the brain. And a few examples that I would give you on that is, one is a very famous case of Phineas Gage where he had a railroad spike go through part of his brain, and it caused his personality to radically alter. And this isn't a one-off either. Like, this is all throughout neuroscience. You'll have scenarios where part of your brain is damaged either through a stroke or through some type of external injury or trauma, and it'll alter someone's personality. Or you have the case of HM, who underwent brain surgery, had part of his brain removed, and he had severe retrograde amnesia as a result of it, and I think he had anterograde amnesia as well. And so when you lose your ability to form new memories or to remember things that happened in the past, and your emotions are radically altered, you can look at that person and still say, like, genetically they're the same, maybe some of their habits, their quirks might be the same, but like who you are, it changes. That's not to say that that person isn't still valuable. That's not to say that you shouldn't still care about and try to take care of someone, because they still experience pain, they still experience, feelings and sensations, they're still a human. But when your brain is gone, when you die, there's no evidence that anything lives on afterwards. There's no evidence that there's anything there. I did a whole video on near-death experiences that really dives into this and dives into what we know is happening and dives into all of the inconsistencies that we see across cultures between near-death experiences and like what they experience in the afterlife. And it's like everything points to the fact that it's entirely going on in your head. Mm-hmm. And so unless I had some real evidence pointing to the fact that something lives on, that consciousness is able to, be embodied in something, or that it's able to think outside the brain, then I have to maintain this position of severe skepticism when it comes to that notion.
And I know, Zane, that you have another topic that you want to present.
Like, being alive does not make you stop being you. Like, when you have a dead body in the ground, like, yes, that's still my uncle there, even though he's still not alive. Same thing as if you drive a Chevy. If they take it apart, that transmission is still from your Chevy. If you're still smart enough to recognize it, if you could still find a serial code number, you'll still realize, like, oh, yes, that's part of my Chevy over there. So if we was that good with humans, because we decay, it's kind of hard to keep track. So, like, after organs decay and all that stuff, you turn to mush or you get eating, it's hard to point at pieces of the person and be like, that's still my uncle. But, like I said, for Chevy, it's easier. You can still point to that transmission and say, that's mine.
Well, but at the same time, I mean, you can't help but address things the way they are as you see them. Like, let's say, and this would be horrible, if it ever happened, but let's say someone, that you cared about was in a coma, right? You would still say, sure, that is my relationship there, but you wouldn't be able to have the same relationship with them that you had before they were in a coma, right? These are things that, you would still be interacting and you'd still have those emotions and you'd still have that connection. But when that person can no longer interact with you in a way that you have known before, then you're left with what you have now.
Can I kind of jump in on that too? Like, if you have a family member who's in a coma, you still have someone who, like, they still have their memories intact. They're just not able to tap into them. They're not able to access them. They're in a comatose state. But they have a potential to come to and to still, jump right back up where they left off. Whereas you start getting into a gray area when you talk about what makes you you. And this gets deep into philosophy. If you go back to, like, the concept of the ship of Theseus, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's this ship that, like, over time, over the course of like 100 years, it was, taken apart and different parts were added back in, and it slowly
replaced.
Yeah, once you have every single piece of the ship that is removed and changed, is it still the same ship?
If you did keep all of those pieces that you replaced and then reassembled them.
And by comparison, if you have your body that is every 7 years or so, it's like swapping out all of its cells, all your skin cells, all your brain cells, all your blood cells are being replaced. Is that still you? Like, you have different memories, different experiences. So 7 years from now, it kind of is a different person, but you have the same genetic code with a few mutations.
Yeah.
But it's largely different material that makes it up. The consciousness lives on through our memories, through our emotional attitude towards the world. That's largely dictated by our genes. It's dictated by our experiences and by our neural anatomy. But I wouldn't say that Chevy is still that Chevy if you take all the pieces apart and you melt them down into something else and build something else out of it. Eventually, the materials are recycled into something completely different.
I mean, I would still be able to say, like, yes, that's my Chevy. Like, if someone went ahead and made a coffee mug out of my bumper, I'd be like, yes, the coffee mug is from my bumper on my Chevy. So,
yeah, but if it's not yours anymore, then... But anyway, I think you actually had something else you were calling in about. We went down this rabbit trail, which I really like.
I was going to say, if imperfections and character bring realism to Bible, like the fact that they're not perfect people, like,
sure,
to that, make it more realistic.
Well, have you read Harry Potter?
Yes.
Was Snape a perfect character?
Would he be a perfect character?
Yeah. Was he perfect in the way he behaved to other people?
I don't really remember the characters that well.
No. How about Draco Malfoy?
I don't know.
No. Well, these are characters that behaved in cruel and callous ways towards others, but that doesn't mean that they are real or more real. They're still characters in a book, right? So how would that be different from the characters in the Bible?
Well, an issue I was going on about was a couple of like 6 weeks later. 6 weeks earlier, I had called in, and I had heard a little bit more what I usually hear is where people try to point out.
Zane, we're starting to lose you. It sounds like you're in a very windy area. Is there any way you can get to somewhere that has less wind? We're trying to adjust for it, but it's starting.
Hello?
Hi.
Am I good?
You're better, yes. It sounds like there's less wind. I just wanted to be able to hear you a little better. Okay, that
was bad.
That was bad.
Oh, should I take my headphones off?
Try that.
Okay.
And we are holding on. Oh,
Hello?
we're waiting. Hello?
Carry on.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, that sounds way better. Yes, let's do that. Okay, go ahead, man. Can you start from the beginning? Because I couldn't catch everything.
I was going to say, a lot of counter arguments I hear to the Bible, like a lot of the go-tos is pointing out malicious behavior of either God or patriarchs in the Bible, and I'm just kind of wondering why. I don't know. Like, I'm kind of a different Christian, I guess, because I'm just thinking, like, why would you even try so hard to say, you know, God and the patriarchs are benevolent? You know, why wouldn't you just say they are who they are? You know, imperfections would just make them more realistic. Because, like, who do you know who's perfectly good 100% of the time? The fact that you see them do some bad things every now and then will make you think, like, yes, that's what I see in the real world. Sometimes people are good. Sometimes that same person is bad. That's more relatable. That's what you understand is real.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Holden Caulfield. I mean, we can go down a whole bunch of different fictional characters who had jaded pasts. I mean, most of the interesting ones do. It doesn't make them real.
Can I touch on this a little bit?
Yeah,
though?
go for it.
Because a lot of the characters in the Bible who are referred to as righteous, you have people like Abraham, who is going to sacrifice his son in order to show God that he is, you know, a man of faith, and that, you know, that was him passing the test, is that he's even willing to sacrifice the body of his own child. Now, to us, you know, we look at that and we're like, that's horrific.
Yeah.
Like that's absolutely horrible. And then you see these other areas where, you know, David will go out and he'll go and slaughter a bunch of Philistines and take their foreskins and go and bring it in as, you know, a demonstration of like how, look what I did for God, I killed all these enemies of God. And yet for us, we see that and we're like, holy crap, that's like some next level genocide right there. Yeah. And God commanding, you know, the slaughtering of men, women, and children who are non-believers.
The Amalekites,
and so it's not so much that the Bible is depicting them as like good in spite of the badness. It's that the morality, the moral framework has changed since the time of the Bible. Those things were actually righteous. They were actually good to them in that scenario, in that context. They're actually following what God told them to do. They're doing the will of God, which was like the number one thing you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to blaspheme. You're not supposed to doubt God. And yet, for us, our moral framework now in this day and age has changed so much. So for Christians to come along and say like, oh, we have an objective, never changing moral framework, I'm like, one, they're completely disconnected from reality. And two, I'm very glad that they're disconnected from reality and not sacrificing their kids, most of them. Mm-hmm. And although there have been one-off scenarios here and there where people have done crazy stuff like that in the name of God. But you know, it's not that the Bible is depicting these people who are flawed and, you know, yeah, some of it they'll point out like David's mistakes with like Bathsheba. And
Noah was a drunk.
Yeah, but a lot of times what they're showing is that they'll show things that it actually values, it actually esteems these actions. And we just see it as horrific now because we've had a few thousand years of moral progress.
Yeah, and so that's specifically why that gets brought up. Is that those assertions?
I don't understand.
Sure. So if we have people call in who say that they get their morality from the Bible, right? Or that these are perfectly moral characters, or that this book demonstrates morality. And so what Thomas just did is describe to you an entire list of times that there were completely immoral actions taken in the name of that God, to demonstrate that even in the holy book, that God acts immorally, and that's just a response to the statement that morality comes from the Bible.
Well, okay, I guess I don't have too much to say. I think like a lot of arguments would be, de-chambered if a person didn't even try to say that, God is good or anyone else in the Bible is good. Jesus said they are who they are, so you can't say their bad actions make them less real or less, important to think of.
Yeah, it's not about a less real or more real thing. It's about a less moral or more moral thing. And that's the response to it. The reality, you got to prove before we can even talk about it, right? I mean, you have to show that those things happened before we are going to entertain the rest of that. But the assertion of morality is the response to that. And actually, I wanted to ask you one other question.
Okay.
What are your views on heaven?
Some people get to go, some people don't.
Okay, how do you decide? How do you decide who goes and who doesn't?
I don't. God does.
Okay.
How does God decide?
Very strangely, it kind of seems that he has his people that he reforms, and that's who gets his favor and good things on earth, and sometimes heaven as well.
So does God? I'm assuming you believe that God made us. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
And did God make psychopaths too? So if God made psychopaths who are inherently born with smaller than average amygdala sizes that causes them to not be able to feel or sense emotions to the same extent we do, is God setting them up for failure? Because if so, that's kind of fucked up.
Well, and does God love those people less? Is that why? Because in the Bible that I remember when I was a believer, God was all loving.
Well, the whole reason I brought this up is because since childhood, I never was in love with God and still was a believer. And after, seeing y'all show, I'm just kind of really thinking, why is this such a big argument talking about whether or not if God is good or not, when I could, pretty much go the whole way through without needing to think God is good and still go to church and so on and so forth.
Why would you worship a God who's not good?
Belief.
Yeah, what compels you to worship a God exactly.
Is it out of fear?
I mean, it's the same way how it is with the government. I mean, if you don't, there's people who hate the government, hate the cops, and they still do what they say because they're there.
So do you hate God?
No.
Okay.
So you fear what would happen if you don't?
No, I just always thought that, there's some good things that come with some of the advice. So I try to take all the good things I can and be a better person.
That's, while admirable, I suggest that there are lots of other places in this world that you can take good from. And I hope you do. I mean,
that was basically the majority of my experience.
Well, real quick though, I want to backtrack. You said that you find that you can take good from it, but just a few seconds before you said that you didn't necessarily believe that God was good, or you felt like that was irrelevant.
Yeah, it's irrelevant. I mean, even some of the most terrible people got some good lessons to teach you. There's some drug dealers that will tell you to stay in school. I mean,
well, I can learn from serial killers like Ted Bundy, but I'm not going to emulate him as a source of goodness. I'm not going to worship him.
Emulate him as a source of goodness, though.
I'm not going to hold him up on a pedestal, worship him, or go to church to tithe or preach his name.
But your God killed way more than Ted Bundy.
I don't know. I thought I kind of already said it, that I don't try to go ahead and preach that God is good. It's just...
Well, and so the question is if you don't think that God is good, why do you worship him?
I mean, the same thing how I said with the government.
Okay, I can prove that the government exists. I can show you, and if you get in trouble with the government, you can go before a judge. You can experience the government, right? If we were to make this analogy fit, it would be a government that never did anything. And so we would be arguing about whether or not that government exists and not whether or not it's good or bad. Right? That's why it doesn't follow.
Well, I guess if I watch y'all enough, well, then maybe I might be in the same mindset of y'all and not believe and throw it away.
The important thing to me,
but I'm
Zane,
not at that point yet.
No, and the important thing to me, Zane, is that you continue to question. Right? What's important is that you want to know as many true things about the world as possible. You don't need to, and I don't want you to just listen to me and do what I say, because that's terrible too. You know, what I want to do is help you develop your tool set so that you can better understand the world around you, because that's amazing. I mean, I know that you were listening in on the calls before, right? We're talking about this incredible stuff, this mind-blowing, just information about existence and the cosmos and this amazing, beautiful, incredible world that we inhabit, right? Learn about it. You're giving yourself license to explore and grow, and that's how we grow as as society, as humanity. And I want that for you. I want that for you. I think along the way, by developing that tool set, you're probably going to come along to where we're at, but that does not mean the journey's over.
Yeah.
It means it just begins, because that means you have the answer to one question, but that means that we have every other question. And I don't want there to stop being questions, because I want us to keep learning.
Not just every other question, but every other question is suddenly available to be looked into. So like when I used to be very religious, and there were some things that I was taught you just don't question. You don't question God. You don't question the existence of God. You don't look into your faith. You don't doubt Jesus or his existence or any of this. And so being able to suddenly look at the universe from a perspective of, well, if the Bible's not literal, suddenly I can explore an old universe. I can explore the possibility. Maybe it's old, maybe it's not. Let me look at the science and figure out what all of the evidence points to. We can forensically examine our Earth and go back hundreds of thousands, millions, billions of years and find out more about life and about chemistry and us and geology and all this different stuff suddenly becomes open to explore. And so what we want to leave you with is that truth withstands scrutiny. Don't be afraid to scrutinize this stuff. Don't be afraid to open it up. God in the Bible, whether or not he's a good character or a bad character, is kind of irrelevant, because there's good characters and bad characters in fiction. The big question is it true? And the way that we can figure out if it's true is by leaving our fears aside and exploring into it, because if it's true, it'll stand up to no matter how much you scrutinize this stuff, it'll withhold it, and it'll withstand scrutiny, and you'll be able to explore it, and you'll have more evidence to stand on. And if it's not true, all that is going to fall apart, and you get to figure out what actually is true, and that's where we want to go.
That was beautiful. I was going to say a lot of prohibitions when it comes down to learning things, and a lot of things that seem to be against the Bible. I think it's just a lot of people saying that, such as abortion. When I actually watched, it was actually an atheist Bible study that I watched, where it said the Bible actually gives you some instructions on how to perform an abortion on a woman if you think she was unfaithful. Mm-hmm. And if she was unfaithful, I think it said, well, you could divorce her, and if she wasn't, well then, if she was faithful, well then y'all could stay together. So.
And when I was a believer, we never went over that verse.
So a lot of
Drink
things
the bitter water.
Are anti-abortion. I'm just thinking like, well, they don't get that from the Bible to be anti-abortion because of what I just said.
Yeah, I think it's funny that the further you go along, the more you find that people think that their God agrees with everything that they agree with and wants everything.
And I
also
don't think the Bible could forbid you to learn about evolution, because I think that is demanding that God didn't use evolution, saying that no, he had to do it the way I thought in my head, rather than maybe he really did put processes in place. So you could still learn about that.
So I can't help but think about Laplace, right? Laplace was an astronomer during Napoleon's reign, and wrote this treatise about the movements of the heavenly bodies, and presented it, and it went off. It was all about orbits of planets and just how so much of our universe, and it was amazing, but it didn't have anything about God in it. And so famously, Napoleon calls in Laplace and says, well, you've written this book, it's fantastic, but I don't see God here anywhere. Where's God? Because if you're writing about the movements of the planets, surely you have a spot where God has to be there making it happen. And Laplace responded, I have no need of that hypothesis, right? That you have it there when it needs to be there. You explore what the need is. You learn what you don't know. And if you don't know how to explore it, if you don't know how to investigate it, then you build a tool. And those are the best. Those are the best. People talk about E equals MC squared. It's not like that was the solution. That was the beginning of us being able to ask an entirely new question. And every time we go along that way, it's building new tools. And
more useful tools.
Yes.
Because if you just assume that like the planetary bodies are moving because they're pushed by angels or by gods, you cannot make predictions off of that. Whereas if you have actual, scientific equations and formulas, you can predict when the next solar eclipse is. You can predict when the next comet's going to come flying by. Mm-hmm. You can predict all this different stuff, and we can even land a rover on a comet or something. We can do asteroid mining. We can get these trajectories that are so perfect that we can land a rover on Mars, and we know exactly when to launch it. So all of this stuff, it's not just valuable because it tells us it gives us a framework to look at the world. It's valuable because it has predictions that actually pan out, and we can become more and more and more accurate. As far as using the Bible, you mentioned a second ago that the Bible has a different way of looking at abortion than what you're used to hearing about, at least here in the States. And it has a different view on evolution than what a lot of people talk about. And I would say push it a step further. Why are we looking to the Bible at all to dictate our policies? Why are we looking to it at all? Like, is it true or is it not? That is the question that we want to be asking.
Yes.
And so often people are afraid to ask that question. They feel like it's sacred. And I think that the idea of a question that's too sacred to look into, I think that that's horrible. I think that's freaking awful because, like I said, if it's true, ask it.
So
or if it's not true, ask it. Find out if it's true or not.
Yeah.
Why should the Bible be the basis?
And where that fits in with your statement is you said, how come God didn't use evolution? Why do we need to insert God when we have evolution? Like, where is God in this hypothesis?
I was saying that to show how your learning does not have to be stopped. Like, you could just say that fits in with the Bible. I think there are a lot of Christians believe in both God and evolution.
I mean, not in my church, but
there's no reason why both can't fit.
I lived overseas, and pretty much all of my friends were European, and they accepted evolution. It's mostly in the Bible Belt where we see this contrast, but the contrast always stems from a literal interpretation of the Bible.
And
and I got some friends who believe that God gave us some stuff to study. Like, that's, will be some fun of the human experiences to look at, things that are in the world. That's, God giving us a toy to, we look at that and learn, observe.
But whether or not you had God, couldn't you still observe and enjoy the, unwrapping, peeling off the layers of the onion to figure out how the universe works?
Yeah, you could do either one. I mean, they don't conflict with each other.
What if they do?
What if that bridge when I come to it?
Well, because I really don't have a problem with a kind of a deistic view of God. I think it makes an assumption that's unnecessary. But you could say, okay, God wound up the universe like a clock, left it to run. He doesn't interact with it at all. Maybe he's a highly advanced alien civilization that kickstarted the Big Bang, but he's not powerful enough to be omnipresent, or he doesn't really care about the workings of man, something like that. Like, I don't really see a problem with it. What I take issue with is when you have a biblical interpretation that is like God not only cares, but he cares about the finite little things that you do to the point that he would have you burn in hell for eternity for so much as questioning him, for so much as doubting him, and for so much as asking these questions that you're not supposed to ask. That's where I start to take issue with it. I don't think it should be dictating our politics because I don't think that there's any evidence for the veracity of these claims.
And I actually have an issue to take with you after this about that.
Well, I don't know. Well, when it comes to dictating politics, I just think that people get all the different types of interpretations, and they could go either way with it.
Okay, now I have to bring up my issue. So, and Zane, I know you're following us along for the ride. But actually, if there's nothing else, I'll probably take this after the call. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, or this has been a really fun call? Wow.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, by the way, for calling in.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back and
let
listen.
the conversation stop there.
Okay. Well, feel free to call in again. This was really, really good. I'd really look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Yeah, and you also got the Reddit and Twitter sphere. You can engage with us too.
Mm-hmm. And look up Holy Koolaid. Okay. It's really, really cool. His show is just good people.
What's the Reddit link? Is it on your website?
So talkheathen.com really just hosts our podcast. But if you want to find us, there are very active conversations on our official Facebook discussion group. Oh, look at that! It's thrown up on the screen. Facebook.com talkheathen, Reddit/r/talkheathen, mail, me, Jamie, and we have our Twitter that was just built, and we're going to throw that up there as well. If you're not looking at the screen, you can go back through the episode and pull this up and engage with us in any of those places.
And I'm at Holy Koolaid,
like the shirt.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Hey, take care, buddy. Thank you for calling in.
You too.
You know, right? Love this show.
Yeah.
Like every time I walk out of this episode feeling like $1 million because something like that just happened.
Nice.
Dude, you fucking rock. Yes.
Now,
okay.
what's your issue with the
Deism?
The first cause alien super?
No.
The reason I put that forth is because, you know, we have this notion that Arthur C. Clarke basically stated, like any highly advanced
is indistinguishable from magic.
Technology,
right.
yes. And then Shermer, I think it was, took it a step further and said it would be indistinguishable from gods.
Right.
So assuming that we get to the eventual heat death of the universe, but our technology has advanced so much to that point, maybe we could reverse entropy and we could kickstart another Big Bang. You know, create some black holes or something that, you know, I don't know. I don't have the first grasp of physics enough to be able to, or I don't think anyone does.
And I don't have issue with that at all.
Okay.
What I have issue with is the idea that there's not a big, you know, you don't have a big beef with deism. You know, the idea that God wound the universe like a clock and let it go.
From that framework, I can't disprove it.
You can't disprove it in the same way you can't disprove fairies, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, or people who say that they talk to the monster in their closet. Yes. And
because I don't see that it affects my life in any way, shape, or form. And ultimately, I have to, I don't see a God interacting with my life in any way, shape, or form.
Gotcha.
And so I have to be practical in this regard, and I have to basically decide, am I going to live my life worshiping Bigfoot and the Tooth Fairy and the Loch Ness Monster, or this God? And if there's no interaction, and we can do things like prayer studies and see, like even if we can't necessarily test this physical or this, supernatural ether, we can still test the effects that it has on the world.
So long as you claim, as long as it claims, yeah. We
find that there's no evidence whatsoever.
Again, I agree.
And so as far as if there's some type of first cause like that, it really starts to beg the question of where did that alien come from? Why couldn't we be the first ones? Maybe we're in the process of evolving to that stage. Maybe it's impossible. But it's not going to alter my life. I'm not going to reshape my life around the possibility of something. Well, and
that end part is where I take issue. Okay. Because I think you're a very rational person. I think you are a very intelligent person. I'm glad and I wish more people didn't shape their lives around what could be and worship what might be. But there are people who do. Yeah. And those people vote. And we live
but
in
they're not deists,
country.
They're theists.
Oh, no, there are lots of deists who vote too.
No, I'm not. Right? What I'm saying is like the people who are basing political action off of the existence of a god, they're not doing it off of the existence of some amorphous creator that's just a first cause and doesn't give a shit or interact with us in any way, shape, or form. They're doing it from the position of it's a theistic God who not only cares if there's gay people in existence, but he doesn't want them to be able to legally, have a relationship because otherwise he's going to send hurricanes and fuck you up.
But what if it's a type of magical thinking that leads to things like homeopathy, crystal healing, chakras and things like that, where you have a magic an acceptance of a magical thinking, right?
But
and I kind of want to stomp out magical
I do
thinking.
take an issue with that.
Okay, then we're good.
Because what I'm referring to is a purely natural idea of a deity. It would be a deistic deity. And I'm not saying that I hold this position.
Sure.
What I'm saying is I don't take issue with a position where it's a technology-based, like not a technocracy, but like a techno god or something that not god of like techno, but like god of technology, where it's so highly advanced, but it's all within the natural world.
Can we get Techno Viking? Can somebody post that on Reddit? I really miss Techno Viking. Okay, let's.
But it's not supernatural. It's not like chakras and like the universe is like somehow some self-aware entity. I think you just lost your mic.
No, I think it's still good.
Right. Good.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense though? Like,
no, it does. It does.
I don't see people who believe in like maybe there was a first cause. I still think that really starts to beg a question. I cannot take that position because I think it's like if God is more complicated than the universe itself in order to create a universe, then it's like it's an even bigger question. If God is within the universe and he's able to kind of kickstart or spark something that's it's like a kid lighting a match in a fire. He can, a match in a forest. He can start a big fire that is outside of his control, but he was still the first spark. Maybe there's something like that.
Sure.
That happens in cycles. Maybe it's cyclical. Eventually, there would have been kind of an origin. There had to have been something.
Maybe.
Unless time is like completely circular, or like
but okay,
this stuff starts to blow my mind.
Yeah, so if we're taking it back though, where I'm going with it is not the belief itself. It's people who ascribe the belief. It's people who
in the
sign on to it.
supernatural, though.
Yes.
I'm talking about the natural, and that's where I like. If it's supernatural, yes, I do.
Okay.
I do take issue with it without evidence.
All right, then I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. Let's get to the next call. That was really. All right, we have Jonathan in Arizona. Jonathan, you're live with Eric and Thomas. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're doing really good. I'm amped, man. What do you want to talk about?
It sounds like it. Well, first, I have to admit, I called because I figured I might get like a recording for the Atheist Experience coming up in a couple hours.
Oh.
I didn't realize that
They don't like your show enough?
I guess not.
I don't. I can't make a judgment. I've never heard of it.
Well, hey, we're in the same studio.
Yeah.
I did hear a portion of the last call, and it sounds like you guys are having a good time. I like having a good time, so hey.
Yeah. So what did you want to call in to talk about?
Well, I was curious. You're both atheists, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So I was curious. Do you have like any what would you consider justification for belief in a God, or do you believe there is any justification?
I think that I don't know what would justify a belief in a God, but I think your God would.
Like if there was evidence,
he would know what you would. He would know what it would take for you to believe in him.
Yeah, I don't know, because you have to rule out other things, right? How can I rule out a personal sighting of God versus a psychotic break? Because I can prove a psychotic break, I can have a psychotic break. I don't know what a physical interaction with a deity, what it would take to actually prove that or show that.
I'll put forth one thing. If God is omniscient, omnibenevolent, and he's omnipresent, omnipotent, kind of this
all the omnis
Christian notion of a God where like he's not just all powerful, but like he knows everything inside your thoughts and he cares about you. If that kind of God existed, then if it was in our best interest to know about his existence, we would, because he has the power to make it happen. If it's not in and he loves us. If it's not in our best interest to know of the existence of a God, we wouldn't. But it wouldn't matter, because it would all be in our best interest anyways. And so it really wouldn't make any difference if we did or not. If he is a lunatic, crazy God, and he's doing things that aren't in our best interest, and he's all powerful, we're fucked one way or another. Like, it really doesn't make any difference.
Right.
And if this God is, maybe he's not all powerful, but he knows everything. Maybe he wants to make himself known, but he's like way, on the other side of the universe, and he cannot travel to us. The universe is expanding faster than light, and he's just not able to get to us. And it doesn't really make any difference. He's not really God. He's not all powerful. He's more kind of like one of the Greek demigods.
Yeah,
which case it doesn't make a difference.
So I guess the question to you, Jonathan, is Can you tell us about the God that you're calling about? And we can interact with you based on the description that you're going to give us. That way we're not, building a straw man and attacking it, but we can talk to you directly about it.
Yeah, perfect. It kind of sounded like you were kind of paraphrasing, was it Epicurus? Or am I saying that right?
Epicurus?
Epicurus, yeah. It sounded like you were kind of paraphrasing what he had said in the past about if God is like all powerful, he would know how to. Yeah, I can't remember the quote, but it sounds familiar.
And then you get to like, and I just have to throw this in because I absolutely love it. Is a lot of apologists no longer say all-knowing, all-loving, because you get these weird, is God powerful enough to create a stone that's so heavy even he couldn't lift it, right? Is God, powerful enough to create a burrito that's so spicy that he couldn't eat it, right? It's
well, the question itself is nonsensical. You can't answer it because essentially, if you're saying God is all of the omnis, you're in infinite. The question itself is, can God create something more infinite than his infinite? So, the question itself sounds nonsensical to begin with.
Well, maybe infinite is just that, and so there are no, it's just really weird. So I'll give this to you. The apologists now say maximally powerful. That way it's worked out, and they don't get caught up on that anymore. But tell us about your beliefs. Tell us about your God.
Gotta love semantics. Okay, so basically, you probably heard, other people say this, in the past, or whatever, but I actually used to be an atheist. I was brought up Christian, but kind of the lukewarm, we go to church once every 3 years Christian, didn't really talk about it at home or anything. My parents were Christian, and they said, you're a Christian. So growing up, that's what I was told I was.
Okay.
But I really never paid any attention to it. Well, I actually became an atheist. One of my very best friends in the world is an atheist, and we've had tons of conversations. And I started reading books, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I read a book I don't know if you're familiar with called The Encyclopedia of Biblical Errancy. Massively huge book.
No. Although I will say that the Skeptic's Annotated Bible is pretty awesome. I had to in the physical copy. That's pretty fun.
Oh, okay. It might be similar. But I got more holes in the strainer. So I was like, I don't think much of this makes sense. My final deciding thought where I was like, you know what? I can't believe this anymore was actually the concept of an all-loving God sending people to hell for eternity. When I thought that, I was like, this can't be true. So I
Problem of evil.
An atheist at that point, which actually maybe that wasn't a direct reason to become an atheist. I could have just simply believed in the wrong God, but I just became an atheist anyways. I stopped believing altogether.
Can I ask you a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
Were you a skeptic?
Skeptic. So what do you mean? Can you be more specific?
Sure. So when we're talking about skepticism, we're talking about, did you make any major claims like, I know this for a fact, or did you follow more of a Socratic approach to things? Was it, how do I know it's this? How do I know it's that? How can I prove this? Or how can I look into that? What are other possibilities? And when you're questioning your own beliefs, when you're able to look at that from different sides.
Is your world based off of not just scientific evidence, but logic and reason? To try to deduct the truth rather than just accepting things because they have emotional appeal or...
It absolutely is now. And when I say now, I mean the past 6-7 years since I have become a Christian. Absolutely. At the time when I was growing up Christian, no, I would not say I was a skeptic. Whether or not... That's my son in the background, if you hear.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, he's happy to hear you guys.
Yeah.
I don't know if I did make absolute truth claims yes, God exists. I probably did.
Sure.
If I was happy to have that conversation. I didn't have any idea what I was talking about at the time, though. So my personal reason for making the actual choice to become a Christian was through Christian apologetics. I met someone who was learning apologetics from an actual like Christian apologist from a church he went to. At the time, I never even heard the word apologist, had no idea what it meant. But he was meeting up with him later that night and said, hey, if you want to come and ask questions, go ahead.
Yeah.
So we met up. I asked him plenty of questions. He had some pretty good answers that made sense to me. But at one conversation, I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm Christian now. He recommended that I read Lee Strobel's Case for Christ. So I
did Case for Christ really get you, man?
It did, yeah.
Oh, dude. Okay.
All right, bring it on.
Okay. Let's talk Case for Christ. Number one, there's actually not any evidence that Lee Strobel was an atheist. It's a story. There are plenty of things that show that he was a practicing Christian at the time that he said that he was an atheist. Number two, a lot of his reasoning just doesn't follow, man. I mean, if something is old, does that make it more true? Standing the test of time is one of the things in the Case for Christ, right? If you're talking about contemporary evidence, he says that there's contemporary evidence, and one of the proofs that he uses is the when God appeared to the 5,000 or 500? 500.
500?
Yeah, the 500 on the mountaintop. No, we have one a case where somebody said 500 people saw it. There are not 500 documented, each individual wrote down, hey, this is what, so you can't say that that's 500, different contemporary accounts. You have one person, that after the fact wrote it and said 500 people saw it. I can write down that I piss gold, bury it, and dig it up in 1,000 years. Does that make it true? It stood the test of time. You're still reading it.
Well, and you could also say, that 5,000 people witnessed it.
Oh, 10,000.
But it doesn't mean that they actually did.
No.
There's when we look at the Gospels, we look at the accounts that are written about Jesus. They're not actually written by his disciples. There's you look at like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and it's like we don't actually know who wrote them, and in some cases they specifically say that they're not written by someone who was actually there.
Yeah.
And so you start getting it, and then like the first time that they appear, we have like these tiny fragments that appear from I think like P52 or something that's like one of the earliest fragments, and there's this tiny little thing from like John, and it appears like 50 years after Christ allegedly died. And then we have like the first whole Gospels don't appear until considerably later, and then the Bible itself wasn't compiled until like a few hundred years after. And so all of this stuff, it's like they say that there's all this evidence, there's all these writings for him, but it's not as concrete as they would like you to believe. Like if I show you the same evidence for Robin Hood, it's like maybe Robin Hood existed, maybe he didn't. But the legends about him, I'm not going to base my entire life about him or believe miracles about him or about Odysseus from, the Iliad and the Odyssey because, there's all these writings about him that we don't even know who the author was. We don't know when it was written. We don't know, how far after the events it allegedly took place it was written down. And it becomes so much less credible when you actually start digging into it and realizing how shoddy the evidence actually is.
But
sure.
And I'd like to add in, if you were to, well, I'll tell you exactly what I'm going to do. There are plenty of examples of contemporary people who said that they were deities, right? Cult leaders and other religions that have sparked off from Christianity, Christian adjacent religions like Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses, who claim to have made prophecies, who claimed to have performed miracles, and that there are documented cases of people saying they saw those things and writing them down. And in the case of Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses, we still have the writings by the people who said that they saw them. It's close enough in our recent history for us to have that evidence. How do you think that those people were prophesying? Do you think that those were holy people, that they were God incarnate, or whatever the case may be? How do you determine that versus another? And in the case of God revealing to the 500, that was Old Testament. That's when most. I mean, like
it's Jonathan.
Thousands of years.
You said your name was Jonathan?
It is Jonathan. Yeah.
Jonathan,
like kind of a. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Are you familiar with Satya Sai Baba?
With who?
There was an Indian guru that lived in the 20th century. I think he may have died in the 21st, but like basically during all of our lifetimes. And he claimed to perform miracles. He would like pull these little ash pellets out of thin air, like a magician would do, and allegedly raised the dead and did all this different stuff. And he has millions of followers even to this day, despite the fact that he predicted when he would die and he got the date wrong. And this guy doesn't, like, I love the way that Sam Harris puts it when talking about him. He says he doesn't even merit an hour on the Discovery Channel. And yet, when you push it back a couple thousand years to Jesus, you have this story that, like, there's no video evidence of him, like we have of Satya Sai Baba. There's no, firsthand accounts that we have of him. There's no contemporary accounts. There's no secular accounts of Jesus that we know of. There's like this tiny little phrase in Josephus that's thought to be a forgery. And yet, you have all this evidence of Satya Sai Baba, and yet nobody, none of us, we laugh at that when we hear this. We're like, how the heck does this guy have millions of followers that, like, he's obviously a charlatan. Like, this is obviously BS.
Well, maybe we're strawmanning Jonathan. Jonathan, was that a proof that convinced you, or was it something else? Maybe we're on a trail that we shouldn't be. What convinced you about the book by Lee Strobel that, yeah, go ahead.
I guess at first the historicity, the evidence for the historicity of Jesus was compelling to me.
What about evidence?
Like he had mentioned Josephus,
as
someone who had mentioned Jesus. Just the outside, non-Christian sources that mention Jesus. So that at least leads me to believe strongly that he at least existed. Has nothing to do whether or not he was God or raised from the dead or anything like that. Just that was like the first step. Okay, I believe that history can demonstrate that Jesus existed, at least enough for me to believe it.
Or that someone named Jesus existed. If you look at the writings of Flavius Josephus, it talks about, number one, it was not at the time, it was after the fact, and number two is referencing a Jesus who was brother to
James.
There we go.
There were several different Jesuses that were mentioned by Josephus. One of them was one during the siege on Jerusalem that led to the destruction of the temple, and he was killed by a flying boulder from a catapult, which is obviously a different account. But it wasn't uncommon at the time to have characters named, Jesus was basically Joshua. It's the same word. And
yeah, it was a common name.
Yeah, and they're basically, they were expecting a Messiah, and it was really common for people to come and to pose as prophets and whatnot. I don't,
just like there is today.
But even if I completely grant you that Jesus existed, which by the way, I'm not a mythicist. To me, it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter if Jesus existed or didn't. I think that there probably was some guy named Jesus. I can't prove it or disprove it. I have some evidence from showing that he did, and I've got mythicists who will argue with me that he didn't, and I don't care. It's irrelevant. This dude, and he has all these legends that spring up around him. It doesn't matter to me if Hercules existed. I don't think he was a demigod. I don't think Hercules did, for the record, but it makes no difference to me. The existence of Jesus, there's tons and tons of characters throughout history who have been emperors who have claimed to be gods. I believe that they probably existed, but I don't believe that they were gods.
Okay. Right, and you probably because you don't have a good reason to.
Sure. So what's your good reason?
What you would consider a good reason for yourself? Because obviously, evidence is evidence, for everyone, but I guess it's subjective to a sense. Not proof. Proof is conclusive.
You have to apportion your belief to the evidence, and I can bring up something that may look like proof until we discover that maybe there's a third explanation that works even better. The best thing is to keep an open mind such that you apportion your belief to the evidence available.
But not so open that your brains fall out.
I love that quote.
There's a quote by Christopher Hitchens that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And
yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I read that. Was that in God Is Not Great, or was that in...
That was in The God Delusion.
Was it?
Huh? Oh, that's Dawkins.
That's Dawkins.
Yeah, but
I thought it was... It
could have originated with Hitchens, but I know Dawkins popped it in there.
But one way or the other, you also have to apply Occam's razor to something. Like, are you taking, like, this account appears decades after, Jesus allegedly lived by a non-witness that is putting forth these claims of miracles. Is it more rational to assume that someone got some details wrong, that they had an agenda, or that there was, that it was a fairy tale, just like we have, stories about Odysseus, about gods and crazy miracles and stuff that are happening? Or is it more likely to assume that all the laws of physics and nature suddenly just didn't apply back then, but they do today? And you asked me a second ago, what would it take to convince me? I actually did a video on this where I talk about prayer studies. And I talk about how even if we cannot measure the supernatural world, we should be able to measure its effects. I talked about this a second ago.
Sagan. We're getting corrected.
What? Oh, it was Sagan that initially said extraordinary claims require extraordinary.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I think it was Demon Haunted World, actually. I know that Hitch referenced it many times. But essentially, though, like, if you do a prayer study, you should be able to test the effects of the supernatural on the world. If it exists and God cares, we should be able to test it. You should be able to have this group, and we've done studies like this with thousands of people who are cardiac, who have cardiac arrest and have complications and stuff, and they'll measure recovery rates based off of a control group that isn't prayed for, a control group that's prayed for and doesn't know that they're being prayed for, and a control group that is prayed for and told that they're being prayed for. And the ones that know that they're being prayed for actually fared worse, and the ones that weren't prayed for and the ones that were but didn't know it, they fared exactly the same. There was no difference. And so something like that...
I do understand all that stuff, and we probably agree on more than you guys might assume, because I say I'm a Christian. A lot of the stuff I am aware of, like the prayer studies and stuff like that. To me, that's kind of like a side topic, whether or not prayer works, or well, I mean, obviously if there's no God, prayer doesn't work, but I guess if there's a God, whether prayer works or not, or if there's a God and he actually cares at all about anybody, these are all different questions. So basically, I guess to kind of break down how I was, persuaded to believe is the historicity of Jesus. Seeing the evidence that suggests that he is real or was real was convincing. The fact that the disciples accepted death rather than recant they had seen him risen from the dead.
Well, hold on. Quick pin in that. You know that there are stories of cult members following their leaders and drinking poison or ritually committing suicide
Jim Jones,
that are
stuff like that. Yeah.
that are nowadays. Holy Koolaid is
drinking the
actually
Kool-Aid.
drinking the Kool-Aid. I mean, you can have people
It's actually
who
Flavor Aid, but
you can have.
I'm not saying that people don't die for what they believe.
Okay, so why is it convincing to you that that God is true if people were willing to die for it? We're giving you examples of things where, I mean, unless you're assuming that those people were correct because they were willing to die for it as well, you're going to need to throw that out as a convincing piece of evidence, aren't you?
Well, there's a difference between someone dying for what they believe and for someone dying for what they claim that they saw.
No, because the cult members claimed that they saw it too.
There's cult members that claim that Jim Jones performed miracles. There's there's a lot of eyewitness accounts of all kinds of crazy ideas that, like, you have not serial killers, terrorists, like suicide bombers, who sometimes they'll have like a dream of the Prophet Muhammad or Allah or something, and they feel like they experienced it, they saw it firsthand, but it's still up here, and it's still, they're dying for something that they believe in. That, I could, we could get Matt Dillahunty in here and he could perform a magic trick and claim that it's a miracle if he's dishonest. And there are probably people out there who would actually believe that there's some supernatural element to it. That doesn't make it true.
Being willing to die for a thing does not make it true.
Absolutely, and I agree with that.
Okay, so can you go back over that one more time? You said there's a difference between what? Between people who believe it and people who
claim that they have seen it.
So okay, so
if I'm looking at it objectively, and I see a group of people who who martyr themselves or commit suicide because of something they say that they believe is true, versus a group of people who accept death rather than recant on something they say they saw is true.
Okay.
To me, there's a substantial difference.
What is the difference there, and how can you tell that difference?
I guess the difference would be that just like you said, just because someone believes something is true and they die for it doesn't make it true. And I absolutely agree with that.
Sure. And also, we're talking about stories, right? I mean,
yeah.
Let's take, anyway, go ahead. I apologize.
That's okay. So to me, it seems more rational that a group of people who are telling the same story about, I'll just be specific, the disciples who had claimed that they had seen Jesus rose from the dead, that they all rather accept death than to say, okay, no, it's not true, it's a lie.
Sure, so they all fully believed. Like, they really believed that they saw it. So
yeah, but these are accounts about them dying. These aren't, these are accounts that happen later.
But even if we
don't know that they're
it,
true. But even if it is true that they did die for something that they believe, do you think that, and even if they did believe it 100% and they believe that they saw it, do you think that eyewitness testimony is reliable?
Because if you do, then what separates you from the people who committed ritual suicide?
Well, and I'd like to elaborate on this even more, because you have instances where you have people like Dr. Elizabeth Loftus and Dr. Julia Shaw, who have demonstrated that people can not only misremember things and have false memories that they're able to conjure up that they really genuinely think happened that didn't, but they've also shown that they can plant false memories in people's mind to make them think that they did things that they didn't. You have an entire organization called the Innocence Project that bases its work around helping people to get out of prison who've been wrongly incarcerated based off of eyewitness testimony, when then DNA evidence will come along and show that they weren't actually the one who committed a murder. So eyewitness testimony, it's not reliable at all. Like, our brains aren't these perfect machines that are like videos that record things and pull it back. Every time that you remember something, the act of remembering it slightly changes, it slightly alters the wiring, the neurons in your brain, so that you remember it a tiny bit different each time.
Last episode we talked about Woodstock and how there are people who claim that they were at Woodstock, and if you count them, it is physically impossible for that many people to have actually been there. Yeah. Right? And it's just, oh no, I was totally there, and they really do believe it. You're never there.
Well, sometimes too, you'll have memories that, you look at your childhood and you think that, oh, this happened, and then you go back and look at the pictures, and it's not, it maybe happened to a sibling, and everyone thought it was you, and they've retold the story so many times that you actually believe that it was you. Like, you can actually develop false memories over time. Our brains are very plastic. They're very susceptible for trickery and for, we have all kinds of cognitive bias and self-delusion, but to say that memory is infallible, or that people can't have false memories, I think there's a lot of evidence to the contrary with that.
Sure, and I'm sure all of that stuff is true. And if I were going to compare how likely that is in the case of the disciples witnessing Jesus be resurrected, I would say it's more likely that they were lying than that they all forgot that Jesus was risen from the dead. If I were looking at the story and I was convinced that it's not true, I would think it's more probable, more reasonable to believe that they all lied.
No.
Happened when it didn't.
Those aren't the only cases. We're not saying they're liars. We're saying that there is a chance of misremembering, or that they really thought they believed it. So let me give you a hypothesis that the Jesus that they thought they saw, or let's give you that this historical Jesus existed, right? And I'm going to say that this historical Jesus was a con man and was able to convince people that he rose from the dead. How can you tell the difference? How do you know one from the other? Because you're going to wind up with the exact same result that you're saying convinces you of one of those results versus the other.
Well, I guess you have to create more of a hypothetical scenario, because I wouldn't believe it based on the fact.
Hold on. Are you saying it's a bigger leap to say that Jesus was a con man than that Jesus was the Son of God, able to create miracles and be able to heal the sick and be raised from the dead. You're saying that is more likely than a con man?
No, not. I'm not saying that's more likely.
Okay.
I would just say
because that would be really silly.
No. I was just going along with like your hypothetical where you said, is it more that he was just a con man? But and you asked me what I think about that, but I would need more information because I would not believe, based on the fact that I don't think he would be able to convince people that he was crucified, put in the tomb, and then raised from the dead. If that he wasn't first of all crucified, because Rome was pretty good at killing people. And
I don't know.
In the tomb.
No, but because you're saying it is such a cool magic trick, it has to be true. Have you seen David Blaine?
No, that's not.
That guy's badass.
I would have said Chris Angel, but that's okay.
Chris Angel's a little too bloody for me. David Blaine. Didn't that guy exist like in ice for 2 weeks without eating? Or supposedly, like,
yeah.
I mean, or
there's a
hold
lot
his
of
breath
stuff.
for 10 minutes.
There's a lot of stuff that David Blaine has done on camera that is obviously like the audience is in on it, and it's like altered.
Don't kill my.
I shouldn't be giving.
Come on, man! Yeah. You're busting my balls here.
Spoiling your childhood.
Yeah.
I think you guys are on the wrong track with David Blaine. It's obvious he's a devil worshiper.
Obviously.
Look, watch this. Hang on. Hail Satan!
Yeah, right.
I'm sure that was funny, but I can't see it. So.
I just did a really stupid magic trick.
Yeah. The rings are not connected, and the rings are his fingers. Now they are. So, okay. Here's the deal. You seem like a very fun guy to talk to, and we are past the end of our time. I'd like to get to some other callers on our after show content for patrons, but I would not want to rob the audience of getting to talk to you. Can you call next week?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll set a reminder. So I'm in Arizona right now. It's 12:32. What time is it where you guys are at?
It's 2:32 right now. So you're 2 hours behind
2 hours.
us. So
gotcha.
call
what
about.
Is the best time for?
Call about 15 minutes before the show starts. So that's going to be 12:45 our time, which will be 10:45 your time.
Okay.
We're going to set aside, we're going to ask our call screener to write your name on a Post-it, and we're going to save a spot for you. So you call in, and we're going to have a spot for you.
That's what makes you guys cool, man.
You know what, man? I really appreciate you calling in. I would love. I don't think we talk enough about counter-apologetics. And I just diving into apologetics and counter-apologetics is something that really excites me, as long as you're an honest actor. If you do the precept thing, you're going to drive me out of my mind. So,
I have to admit, I'm not sure what I hear the term presuppositionalism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what it means, actually.
Sure. So I'll describe that off the air or after this call. But I do want to say thank you so much for calling in. And, dude, you rock. I can't wait to talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks for calling.
Sounds good. I'm sorry, what were your names again?
My name's Eric.
I'm Thomas.
Thomas is a guest. You can check him out on his...
Koolaid.
That's right. And he's also has another show.
I also have a podcast called The Here and How Podcast, as in, how do you do? How is it done?
So
How is it done?
He's not going to be here next week. We're really, really happy to have him on as a guest today, but please definitely check him out. And I will be here with my regular co-host, Jamie Boone, next week, and I can't wait to talk to you.
I will simply cease to be.
Better not. We got work to do, man. We got some collabs. All right.
I'm sure I'll be back.
Take care, Jonathan.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm. Presuppositional apologetics. And for those waiting on the line, we will get to you. We're just going to get to you after the show. Presup is when someone presupposes an answer before they get into the argument. So the Matt Slick argument. We had somebody call in who said that their name was Evolution Fails. and their supposition was that a God is required to be able to... let me see if I got this exactly right. He was saying that you need a God to be able to make certain judgments about things, right? You need a God to be able to make moral judgments. And the reason that he was saying that was he's saying, how do you go from is to ought, right? How do you go from your experiences to making true statements about things, right? Isn't it just a collective of experiences? And he's saying he bases his knowledge in God. And since God is perfect, then he can move forward to make moral, ethical, or truthful pronouncements about things. And so he said, how can you prove this?
Starting with the assumption that God exists, that God is good, that God is perfectly good.
And that God gives him that ability by him surrendering himself over and having the Holy Spirit reside within him. And so all of those things are assumed, and now he says, I have all of it. Now you have to prove that you have it, or else you can't even talk to me about anything else, because I obviously have the answers. It stops the conversation before you can even start to have it.
Well, what we're trying to do is go back to those basic core assumptions and be like, wait. How do we know that God exists? How do we know that God is good if God exists? How do we know that, you start breaking it down at its core, and it's like you realize that this person who assumes that maybe they have this really strong argument that it really doesn't hold up. Like they're making so many assumptions that you cannot start with the assumptions. You have to examine the assumptions before you even start.
Yeah, when evolution fails called in, it was how do you know that the laws of logic are true? Well, because they've shown to be true. Okay, so that's your experience. How do you know that it's true? Okay, how do you know? Well, I have God, and God, therefore I'm right, because Ali oxen free. I'm presupposing that I have the answer.
It's like, how do you know God is true? Oh, because of my experiences. Well, how do you know that those experiences are true?
Because God lets me know that it's true.
It's circular.
Yeah, and so you can't actually engage. And if it's a precept thing, I just can't. I can't even. But we are over time, and I do want to do a little bit more for patrons. So here's how we do it. In the very, very beginning, when the Atheist Experience, yes, that's our big sister show, right? When the Atheist Experience did their stuff in the studio, they had one effect that I was told about, and it was these green love rings that they were able to make. And so we actually recreated them, and we've got love rings, right? Okay, now we have the end, okay? Our closing line is...
It's like ringworm.
Why? Come on, man. They're love rings. They're love rings. Don't ring them. Okay, so
Because if you like it, you got to put a ringworm on it.
Oh, that's so gross. Don't do that, kids. It's gross. So what we say is, to those of you who don't believe, this is your community. This is where you belong. This is your home, and you're welcome here. You are welcome here. But for those of you, and what we say, for those of you who do believe, we don't hate you, we just think you're wrong. So can you help me say that? We don't hate you, we just think you're wrong. Okay. So for those of you who do believe, we don't hate you.
We don't hate you.
We just think you're wrong.
We think you're wrong.
Dude, you are so fucking good, man. Oh my God. We have 3 callers, Matthew, Ramey, and Daniel.